Great. Well, thank you. Welcome everybody to our second Equity Town Hall of 2024/2025. For those who don't know me, I'm Patty Pon. I have the great pleasure and honor of being the president and CEO for Calgary Arts Development, and we are your hosts for today's town hall. Before we begin, as specifically with the session, as is our way, I'd like to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the ancestral lands of the Niitsitapi, the Blackfoot people, comprised of the Piikani, the Kainai, and the Siksika First Nations. About 300 years ago, give or take, the Tsuut'ina Nation were invited to call this place their home. And then subsequently the Ayahe Nakota Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Goodstoney First Nations. And recently, the Otapemiswak Métis government formed with a new constitution, and the place that I'm coming to you from is now known as Districts 5 and 6 of the Otapemiswak Métis government. And all of us who call this place our home here in Treaty 7 territory, as some of you may know it as. You know, as I was thinking about today's session, and often when I offer a land acknowledgement, it really is about the land and the place where we come from. And I've had the honor of learning from some extraordinary people, including someone you'll hear from today, Sable Sweetgrass, with regard to an Indigenous way of knowing and being. And I think today what really caught me was, yes, always this place. Today, I am reminded that it is also about the people who call this place home. And it is about the care of not only the land, but also the people who call this place home. And I would just like to commend all of you for taking the time today to join us. As you've heard, this session will be recorded. I hope for the benefit of others to maybe listen in on. But know that those of you who are taking part with us today are doing a tremendous thing in being able to talk about how we care for each other on this place that I have the great honor of getting to call home. So with that, thanks again for joining us. And I am going to look to JD Derbyshire, who will be one of our hosts and facilitators for today's session. Over to you, JD.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you for everyone who's made it here live and in person and who is able to keep your camera on. It's always appreciated in these very weird spaces to see some. You look real and live to me. So you may not be, you may be reasonable facsimiles, but I'm thrilled to see you. And also, if you are more comfortable participating with your camera off, you are welcome too. Lovely to see your names up there. And, I'm left to my imagination what those humans might look like, but I can feel your presence. Thanks for coming. It's our hope that, yes, the recording of this will find its way out to wider audiences, but it's always nice to have some people gathered around the table today. So thank you. I was actually going to throw to Helen Moore Parkhouse from CADA to just mention what we're doing with this series and the ones that might be coming up next. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. What I'm going to do is just, first of all, thank JD and Sable for their wisdom today, and thank JD and Toyin, who's unable to be with us today, for organizing this series for this year, and just let you know what's coming up in the rest of the series. The next one will be on October 28th, and it's called Imagining the Unimaginable, Equity for Newcomers and Immigrants in the Arts Sector. And that will be led by Toyin Oladele, who is a very key component to this whole series. She's the founder and innovator of the Immigrant Council for Arts Innovation. And she's going to talk about her upbringing and how it brought her to success, failures, and current grapplings as she tries to make the art world in Calgary and beyond a more equitable place. There will be an opening share like there is today, followed by community discussions. The next one after that is on November 25th, and it's based around artists as change makers. And that'll be a discussion about making change through art while embedded in the community, what's working and what isn't, and grappling with trying to make the world a more equitable place through the arts. The next one will be live from our Congress. So some of you may know every year we do a Living a Creative Life Congress, kind of resonant around the themes of art for social change. That will be on December 4th and 5th. And there will be a live from Congress Equity Town Hall at some point during those 2 days that we'll publicize once we have everything completely confirmed. And the final one in the series is called Climate Change Art, and that will be on January 27th, where we will invite local heroes working to make art practices more sustainable. So again, more details will be coming of that, but we hope that you'll all be interested in participating in the ones that resonate with you, and we'll look forward to seeing you all there. And I think that's my final thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. So today what we're going to do is a small presentation from a grassroots organization that Sable and I have informally started that's gathering members. We often joke that underneath grassroots initiatives are dirt initiatives, dirt where the things grow. This one is definitely still in the dirt. We found a few potatoes this morning, I think. That'll be about 10 minutes. And then we'll go to interviewing Sable about her upcoming work at Theatre Calgary in the spring, and you'll see how it all ties in. Then after that interview, we'll take a little break, and those who can or want to come back can come back in, and we'll have a little grappling about some of the things that may rise up in conversation with Sable. So for this next part, I'm going to go to a bit of a slide presentation. I do this for two reasons. They're not very pretty slides, but I use slides as a way to help my own brain keep track of what I'm talking about. So it might not be what you expect in a slide presentation, but we'll see how it goes. How's that sound? And then I'll come back. Also, if at any point in time you need to take care of yourself, get a glass of water, bio break, take a break because your mind's full of concepts that you need to go and draw or think about, please do. We'll leave a email. You'll see an email come up, Art Rights, which is the organization we're burgeoning, we're birthing. And you can always email us at any time if anything comes up that you want to talk about more. But first things first, take care of yourself and know that it's recorded. So if you need to leave for any reason, you can find it on Kata's website. I think it takes a couple weeks to get up, Helen, is that right? A week or two? Yeah, Angela's nodding. Okay. All right, let's see if I can figure out this next technological share screen magnificence. Can everyone see that? Art Rights?
Yes.
Amazing. All right. Art Rights. ART stands for Artists Reverberating Transgendered Rights with JD Derbyshire and Sable Sweetgrass today as part of the Equity Town Hall. Art Rights is a grassroots initiative collectively organized by trans artists and allies. There's the email I was telling you about if you want to get onto the mailing list. Of course, the garbage trucks are coming now. I'm not going to take that personally. I'm just not. artsrights@gmail.com. Our founding principles are the ideas that the reason that we formed is ACE, to activate, celebrate, and educate. So we activate imaginative conversations and micro events that encourage folks to be curious about gender. We celebrate transgender artists and shine the spotlight on their existence and works of art. And we educate folks to think critically about transphobia and connect the dots between trans rights, women's rights, and human rights. Today, we're here to celebrate the works of transgender playwright Sable Sweetgrass. But if we were here to educate, we might I just want to give you a little sampler from one of our courses called, conversation clusters called Lovely Liquid Language, Speaking Gender Tongues 101. And this quote that we use, language can never define a person completely or with perfect accuracy. It is, after all, just words, but language that help us describe our identities, not only to others, but also to ourselves, can be life-saving. And that's a quote from Schuler Baylor, author of He, She, They, How We Talk About Gender and Why It Matters. So the term transgender is an adjective that describes people whose gender identity differs from the gender they were assigned at birth. Cisgender. In short, if you're not transgender, you're cisgender. It's pretty simple. That is to say, if your gender identity matches the gender you were assigned at birth, you are cisgender. Now, sometimes this term cisgender can make some folks angry. For today, let's just agree to agree that saying you are cisgender doesn't change anything about you. It's a word that's been around since the 60s. You can even say cis woman or cis man. It's something that you can add to describing your identity, not something that takes away from your identity. Using the label cisgender to describe cisgender folks is a way to affirm the existence of trans people, not to make anything else disappear. When cis women, for example, acknowledge that they are cis women, they are also subtly, but importantly, acknowledging that cis women are not the only women out there, that trans women exist as well. Non-binary. This is a way to describe a person's gender that doesn't fit society's current understanding of only man or woman. So we're going to activate a little bit now. Consider if you added a gender identifier to your name on your Zoom screen today. Would it be cis, trans, NB? And NB is what we use for non-binary because NB is used to designate non-Black. What would adding this identity give you? What would it take away? What could it give to someone else? Maybe you have your own way of describing your gender identity. We will return to those questions later, but for now, if you want to add one of those choices of something or something of your own to your Zoom name, if you don't want to do it right now, that's okay too. Just contemplate why. Make it an ongoing question. So the three offerings we have today are trans, cis, NB, or anything that you use yourself. Mine today would be Woboy NBTM for trans mask. I think I'm just going to put NB for today behind my name, just to keep things simple. But today we're here for the last and funnest part of Arts Right, which is to celebrate the fabulous Sable Sweetgrass, who doesn't use any of the terms that I've just mentioned. Sable refers to herself as, and I already got it wrong phonetically, but here we go. I think I did it wrong. Okay, awowagi. You can correct me later, which is such a great term, Sable. And you get all the great terms, but you're Blackfoot. I mean, I get NB. It sounds like a box store, you know? But this one, awowagi is so great, bud. It also happens to be the title of your play, which is at Theatre Calgary, April 22nd to May 11th. And I'll just read what how Theatre Calgary is describing it. A comedic drama about the importance of family, a wowagi.
Awawaki.
Yeah, there. Say it again. Say it again.
Awawaki.
Yes, that's it. I will learn it. Is a living room comedy of errors about Chrissy Two Guns, a Blackfoot transgendered woman whose estranged father Joseph shows up in her life again. Joseph mistakes Chrissy's friend Tony for Chrissy herself, and confusion ensues. This world premiere by local playwright Sable Sweetgrass is an immersive theater experience where the audience is enveloped within the world of the play in the intimate Arts Commons big secret theater. Well, my friends, I have known you a very long time, so thank you for being with us today to talk about your play. We know you so much as a cultural connector and an activist in the community. You are one of my closest trans friends. We have lots of fun together. First question, how do you feel about that mainstream description of your play? How did they do?
Um, I think it's good. I mean, like it is even for me, it's kind of hard to describe. In some ways I think of it as a comedy, but then other ways I think of it as a drama. I don't know, it's kind of hard, it's hard to describe. With this play, it was kind of like my very first uh trying to imagine a story within to me it was sort of like the parameters of a stage and how to tell a story on a stage. Um, and so it was, trying to figure it out. Like I was thinking about it, I mentioned to you, um, I was thinking about it like a sitcom, like one day at a time. My favorite sitcom, and or the way it was set up and trying to imagine it within space um but yeah, so I guess I look at it like it's like a comedy, it's a drama. Yeah.
So, to the best of your knowledge, is there a sitcom-ish like play that centers the story of a transgendered Blackfoot woman?
Not that I know of.
and this was a long time coming in this world premiere. I would love you to talk about some of the history, where it started, how long it took to get to where it is. Um, yeah, let's just start there, Sybil.
Yeah, well, it started in 2012. And so that's the beginning is I I had just I was I had an initial plan to be a lawyer, and I went to UBC to go to school, but I was always but I think my real dream was to write, and but there's the pressure to kind of pursue something else. Um, but when I kind of made up my mind, like I need to do something else. This is not fitting for me, and I left, and I was kind of in a really sort of difficult time, and trying to figure things out. And my son was very young at the time. Um, and my good friend Troy Emery Twig, he's a Blackfoot dancer, choreographer, actor, artist. he was getting really frustrated with me, and he was just like, you have to do something. You're coming with me to Edmonton." And so we jumped on the bus, because I don't know if it was the Grey, no, I don't know if that was a Greyhound, but anyways, a bus, and it took us up to Edmonton, and he set me up with his name is Ed Roy, who is a director and dramaturg from Toronto, and I think he works a lot. He works out with like Buddies in Bad Times Theater, and so he's kind of partnered me with Ed and around trying to tell a story, any story, a story from the perspective from of a Blackfoot transgender woman, and yeah, it's we did it for the it was called the Rubaboo Festival. I think that was the first year, or maybe it was the second year of the Rubaboo Indigenous Arts Festival. And we did a reading of I completed the first half of the play in it was like in 2 weeks. And a lot of what you'll see on stage is still the first half is still pretty much the same as it was at the Rubaboo Festival. It's very much the same. Um, but yeah, over the years, I finished writing the second half of the play a couple of years later, and then I presented it in Toronto. I think it was in 2014 at the Wisakijak uh, Festival at Native Earth Theater, and then I just kind of I sort of I keep putting it away because I got to start looking for work. I gotta work, and I actually I went back to school again in 2013. I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I workshopped this play there with other Indigenous writers, and I was really lucky to have Eden Robinson was one of my professors there at the time, and we had we had a lot of really great writers who were mentoring us at that time, and but it was really getting a lot of feedback from other um, Indigenous writers, and it's that really helped because sometimes I often wonder about like who am I writing for, and I'm always thinking of trying to think about the audience and who is listening to this story, and I came to the conclusion while I was while I was at a, IA that I wanted to write the story for my people, for the Blackfoot people, and that if it was, like the story was authentic to them and that they understood it, and it resonated for them, the humor, the heartache, all of it, then it would be, then the authenticity would be, you know, translate. And but I mean that was a worry for me too. Like, would it translate? But um, after I finished at IA, I came back to Calgary and worked on it a little bit more. Um, and I did do a reading here that was during an playwrights festival through Theatre Calgary. And then that's around the time when it got selected for the to be a production here in the Calgary, which was I was really excited. That was my goal to get a production of it here because it's set here in Calgary, and this is Blackfoot territory. Um, when I was in Toronto, Buddies in Bad Times Theater had expressed interest in it, but I wasn't sure I just wasn't sure if the story would resonate as much if it was in that territory versus being in Blackfoot territory. So I've been working with Theatre Calgary since 2021, and so finally it's going to come into production in next year in April.
So 2012, math is not my forte, but 2012 and 2024, so I think that's 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And I know that I've had the privilege of reading your work, Sable, and we were talking the other day about how this ties into ideas of reconciliation. And in some ways, reconciling inside families, reconciling with gender, reconciling with those ideas inside yourself and others. Could you speak a little bit more to that? Could you grapple with that in front of us?
Yeah, at the time that I was writing it in 2012, that was just like a few years prior, it had been the apology that was made by the government of Canada about around residential schools. And then that, and what followed after that was, Truth and Reconciliation, but also the, uh, what did they call it again? The compensation for survivors of residential school. And so that was really in my mind and in my life at that time, because I had, my mother was as a residential school survivor, and many of my family members are residential school survivors. And so, that's part of the play is around Joseph, the father, is a residential school survivor and is getting compensation, and wanting to use that compensation in a way when reconnecting with his daughter. And so that was something that came up, and kind of in my own life, like seeing around me like what was taking place. And sometimes um, in the in terms of like compensation, it can make things worse. Like, I mean, money can make things worse, and money can, also help, but it can be a really complicated thing. And to mix it in with trying to do like reconciliation, um, it's kind of that's a weird relationship in itself. And um, but I think at the heart of it is that there's this father who's very conservative, very transphobic, homophobic, um, in his younger years, coming to back to his child, his daughter, and needing to um, reconcile. So that's where, there's tension, a lot of tension there.
Um, we laughed when I asked you the question of, do you know of any other situation comedies that feature a transgendered Blackfoot woman? And you laughed. Not that I know of. What was it like casting this part?
Um, yeah, it was hard to kind of cast it. Like, um, we have some really talented um Blackfoot performers, but I feel like, and a lot of Blackfoot aspiring Blackfoot artists, but I think that we still have a ways to go in sort of building up that talent. And so I think the hardest role to cast was the role of the father, Joseph, and as well the role of Richie, the son. Um, we're just lucky that, like in here in Blackfoot territory, we have some really great um, two-spirited actors and trans actors. Not a lot, but I mean they are here. And so casting Chrissy and casting Chrissy's transgendered and Tony is two-spirited. And so casting those two roles wasn't too difficult. I could immediately, in my community, in my circle, identify who I thought would be great for those parts.
Um, I wonder if you could talk about how you manage as a writer, taking care of yourself, writing about topics that have affected you and your family, and the gift that I know this is going to be, having read it, the offering that's I think is going to heal so much and educate and entertain, and there's such great laughs in it. But how did you balance where you needed to know that you had to go as a writer and taking care of yourself inside all that? It's not history to you. It's still a part of your living world. How did you do that, Sable?
Yeah, that was that was that was difficult because we would do these 2 week writing workshops. And I was lucky that Ed Roy was there, and we continued to work on this together from 2012 all the way up till uh, I think it was last year, or that the last time we worked on it together. But Ed was really there to almost just like a support, to help me in I just like I have a lot of self-doubt in what I'm saying or what I'm writing, and is it clear? Is this clear enough? And Ed would he has all his years of experience in the stage and storytelling on the stage. So he was there to really help me with uh, you know in terms of like clarity and understanding like what I was trying to say, especially when it came to like the humor and balancing the humor with the really heavy parts, uh, what might, where it might work best here and here. And um, but also, like I said, I would, for myself as a writer, I need to just kind of be in a really quiet space. And so they get me like a hotel room and I go there. But I don't know, sometimes I feel like that's um especially when you're writing something that is so personal, it was uh triggering. It was like it um And I was so thankful for Ed that he was just like they had to usually have him in the same hotel, so he's just a few floors down or whatever. I would start like having a panic attack or something, and I call him, and he'd come and join, like come up to my room, um, and it really was just like I just enjoyed um my time with Ed was just about us. Um, Eating dinner, talking, going for walks and talking. It was just like talking, lots of discussions. Um, and that really helped. It was like therapy in a way. I wouldn't say it's therapy, but at the same time, it really helped me to talk these things out with somebody because like I don't know that I could have done it without Ed. I don't think I could have done it without him. Um, and his be having that person who is like an expert at what they do, but has that empathy, and that he's not Blackfoot, he's not Indigenous, he is gay, and he I think he really understands my like the the experience, the historically, and even today, about how challenging it is in our society to be whether it's gay or lesbian or transgender, you know, that isolation or the alienation or all of it. And so, no, I just, I can't express enough how much I appreciate Ed Roy.
It's very you, Sable, to shout out these people you appreciate so much. And I just want to shout out and appreciate you. I think the timing of this play coming to Calgary, um, I mean, I'm a big fan of the dark comedy. I think you are particularly gifted at the big sort of surprise, a laugh, and then followed by these moments where we're going to be asked to feel things a little bit deeper, and then we're going to be snuck up again on by a joke. Um, I'm really excited. How do you feel about the timing of this in a world, in a province, in a country that is now seeing a lot of anti-trans hatred and legislation being proposed, and you have imagined this piece into a world that I think an imagined work sometimes helps us into thinking about things differently, much better than a lecture or a bunch of facts could. How are you feeling about that whole reality?
Yeah, like to me, like I'm nearly 50, so I'm thinking like 2012 wasn't that long ago. To me, it feels like it was like just a few years ago, like 2 years ago. Um, and but society has changed drastically. I feel drastically, and since 2012 to now, like there's so much that has happened, especially just like within around transgender awareness, and especially here in Calgary. Like I grew up, born and raised in Calgary, and um, there was a time where, like it was, uh, no one had really heard of transgender. No, and even the word transgender wasn't even a term. Like, um, people would say tranny or transvestite. Those are terms that people heard, but not transgender. And so I feel like the world has really changed since 2012. And my question, like, when I worked with Ed the last time was, I'm wondering if this play is even like relevant. I don't know why, like I had this another again doubt about, has the world like gotten past this sort of this story, or um but yeah, what you're talking about in terms of the politics of what's happening in our province, um it it's so frustrating, um that uh we're still dealing with this in 2024. um and but it's frustrating. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily surprise me, you know um even within, I would say, even within the Indigenous community, where we still have to um deal with um homophobic and transphobic attitudes. So it doesn't surprise me that in Canadian society, or um, in our province, that we're still dealing with it. It's like, we talk about like a pendulum. Things start swinging over here, and then it swings all the way back here. Or there's sort of like this really progressive move forward, and then there's a backlash, you know. And but I would say, like, in my experience, I I experienced like a lot more positive interactions in our community, more than negative. I mean, I see the negative on TV and I see the negative on the news, and it's there. Like I'm aware of it, even if I run into it myself. Um, but it's not as much, it's nowhere near as much as the positive, and having really respectful encounters with people and conversations out there that are not always around, that don't always come to an agreement around, gender and identity and stuff, but are for the most part respectful. Um, but at the same time, I think what is happening is something that we really, really have to battle against, because I was really lucky that my family was very accepting of me when I came out, because I came out like around 13, 14 years old, and there was no challenge to it at all, for me and my family. But you know, I'm thinking, I do know of young people who did have challenges, and continue to have challenges. And so we need to protect those kids. We need to create, the support for them, whether it's in school, whether it's, in healthcare. Um, those need to be there. And so it's just really unfortunate that we have this government, this premier who is so backwards in their thinking. I consider her a bigot. I think she's um, just awful, like what she has proposed and what she's putting forth. Um, and we have to fight it. I think I'll just add to that, the way that that mindset of that particular segment of settlers, or Albertans, conservative um, thinking, is that this just suddenly showed up, that but and I've actually experienced, in my play, the production of this play, we experienced transphobia even within the getting ready for rehearsals and productions. It came up, and it was within our own community, and we had to confront it. We had to deal with it, um, because and at the time, the statement that someone made was that they were old school. Their thinking is old school, but actually being transgender, being an Awawaki woman, is more old school than that. Like it goes back thousands of years on this land, in this territory. So this is not something new. Being gender neutral, or non-binary, or transgendered, or two-spirited, or gay, or lesbian, or queer is not new on this land. It was suppressed, by the church, by the churches. It was suppressed by the Canadian government in law, when they banned our ceremonies, when they banned our language, and then took our kids away to residential. They tried to suppress it and hide it, but prior to them being here, we were always here. We 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 always had a role in society. We always had our place in ceremony. Um, and so, that was, I think, one of the reasons why I always felt to myself and my family, um, we're not leaving. Like, I'm not moving to San Francisco. I'm not moving to New York City, or Toronto, because this is Blackfoot territory. I'm not going anywhere because this is our home, and as a Awawaki woman, I belong here just as much as anyone else.
You sure do. And I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, thank you for that teaching. I think that what we're going to do now, Sable, is what we talked about is we want to talk a little bit when we come back about activating maybe some ideas around your play, like how do we support as a community, not just by coming, but by recognizing that we are in a world at this place at this time, to talk a little bit about the National Day of Trans Remembrance, which is November 20th, and how as a community can we support that idea, the idea that if you're not supporting trans rights, connect to women's rights, connect to human rights. And if you're not actively dismantling transphobia, then you are, what is the word, propagating it, growing it. So we want to come back after the break and have a little bit of a grappling as a group in small breakout groups, if people are willing to see what we can activate around Sable's play and National Day of Trans Remembrance. Our conversation with the fabulous Sable Sweetgrass, and we were going to go into breakout rooms, but because there's a nice small group around a table, I'm imagining around a table, and we have some good food that we're sharing. For those of you just joining us, the whole thing will be recorded and available on the CADA website, usually a week or two after we do them, as an offering of the Creative Commons and shared learning. So thank you for that, CADA, and all the labor that takes. Sable, on the break, we were talking a little bit about maybe what you want people to think about in preparation for your play, whether or not we are a part of the collection of letters to us LGBTQ and Blackfoot words that I can't say yet, communities, or not. And something you brought up that I thought was really interesting that we've talked about before, but that I think your play is going to address in a different way, around this idea of residential schools that we're starting to hear more and more about and understand what happened there. But do we consider the experience of two-spirited people inside those? And I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit, and where your thinking is. Thank you. And your heart. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, when I was going to school in Santa Fe, we had to do a presentation about our favorite books, our favorite films. And one of the films that I had chosen was Little Big Man. I know it sort of it's questionable nowadays, but I still really enjoy the film. And the main reason why I really enjoy that film is that they actually have a transgender character in the film. Um, the character of Little Horse in there. When I first saw that, I was like shocked that they had that character there, and even explained in a really simplistic way, but in a simple way, like who that character was, that this character in that particular culture, this child could choose which which role that they wanted to play. You could either be a warrior and go with the men, or you could go with the women and do what the women were doing. And that they revered and held this person up in the community. That was like, I don't know when that movie was made, in the 60s, and I was just like shocked. But there was also something that really um, came to mind, in presenting this at the time, was that, well, then during the residential school period, a lot of two-spirited and transgender children went through the residential school. And just the idea, the thought of the kind of repression, that took place for those children, especially in particular. Um, and, I know people who came out of residential school, older people who in their older years really, really struggled with their identity, with their sexuality, um, because, once that's sort of hammered into your head, what is a sin and what is wrong, and um, it really um, it destroys people. It destroys, the essence of like who you are, and so, you know, I had this feeling that we'll never know the scope of the number of people we've lost, the transgender, two-spirited people who we've lost, um, either in the past in terms of residential schools, at the schools, after they came out of the schools, but even today, there's um, I feel like they're not those people who identify as transgendered are not highlighted in like missing and murdered Indigenous women. Um, they're not they're not necessarily highlighted in the community. I know for myself, one person that I was close with as growing up, um, who was murdered in Lethbridge and was a trans woman, um, but is not recognized in their family as being a trans woman. There's a lot of shame around it. So she will never be recognized or I guess mourned or in that way. And so I feel like whenever Trans Day of Remembrance comes along, I I'm thinking about that's who I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about those people who, who we don't, who were never identified or that we can't identify. Um, and yeah, I think that's something that is really heavy to think about, but part of that truth and reconciliation.
Oh, thank you for that, my friend. We started out by talking about how important it is that imagined works make it to the stage that represent different lived lives of being transgendered, and your particular experience of a Wawagi woman. Did I get it? Was I close?
Awaki.
Awawaki. I see as soon as I hear it, Awawaki. I'll get it. I'll get it. Um, so I just think your play will do, I think that we are in a time of anti-trans hate and legislation, and so that we're trying to lift up not only the representation of transgendered artists, but also these works. And so one of the things I call on everyone here is to go and see Sable's play in April and bring 5 people. This is an activation, 5 people. And if one of those 5 people is someone that you think would never want to see a play, take them anyway. Tell them it's about something else. Just take 1 out of 5 people. So 4 that will just love it. I've read it. It's funny as hell. So just sell the comedy. And that 5th, I challenge you, that one person. Now remember, this one person will need a little extra time on the other end. Because one of the things that we're talking about with the arts right organization is to keep having these conversations, keep having them. I'm privileged to be able to have them with Sable. And I can't express enough the work that I think, to hold these difficult themes, Sable, but also the characters are so alive and so funny and truthful. And I would say, in the way that you also talk about truth and reconciliation, your play is doing that around around gender. Maybe another challenge that I would throw out, another activation idea is National Day of Trans Remembrance is November 20th. And Sable and I were talking in the break. We've never really seen one that's Indigenous centered. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that after. But also there's all kinds of calls coming from the community now. All kinds of transgender activists are saying, what is Calgary going to do? Where are the flags going to be raised? Can there be some ceremony? Can there be some activation? So I know we are all people who show up to things like this are already doers, but just to think about, you know, what we might be able to do as a community. And I think it would be really interesting to be able to have a ritual, Sable, to honor your friend, you know, specifically. Sable has asked, because we're such an intimate group, if anyone would like to ask Sable a question about their upcoming work, or what that's all about, what they might want around the play. I think we'll do some other organizing around making sure that everyone in that play is safe and has community, and then this idea about the National Day of Trans Remembrance. Even write it down. Even that. Tell 5 people about that. That's great. November 20th. Woo! I see Helen with a raised hand. Helen, please.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sable, for all you share with us every day. I'm just curious about process around producing the play in a main stage, mainstream company. How much say do you have on director, designer, casting, feel, venue, audience experience, and all of that?
A lot, actually. Like, I mean, and it was, I think it's because I really pushed for like Blackfoot representation in all areas. I know we can't necessarily get it in every, like, where we want, like everywhere, but in terms of like suggesting names for the actors, and working with whether it was Ed Roy or the director is Alanis King, who is from the like Toronto, and she's, I think, Anishinaabe, um, but has a decades long experience in Indigenous theater. Um, and is two-spirited herself, and so I was surprised that I had so much say in all of those parts, and then going into the rehearsals, I'm gonna be a part of that too, because I there initially I thought I write the play and then that's the end of my role. They do whatever with it, but it's exciting. It's really fun to be a part of that process and to learn more about it.
Thanks, Sable. Does anyone else have a question for Sable? Comments? Thoughts? Stacy, I see your hand up.
Absolutely. Always got lots of questions. And thank you for today's session. I really appreciated the conversation, JD and Sable. The work you do is incredible, and just grateful to share some space to celebrate your work. Um, Question about how we can facilitate conversations around the event. So post-event, is there hashtags? Are there different ways that we can support the conversation and questions? Is there a consideration of maybe creating articles in publications locally to help continue the conversation of the work? I'm just curious. Thanks.
I mean, that would be great. That would uh yeah, I guess I've been so just focused on the production, I haven't really even thought about anything outside of the production itself. But I would love to have, like places where people can talk about it, and get together either in person or even virtually, just to dis after they've seen the play, um, uh, uh, their thoughts, and uh, yeah, leading up to it, I really I hope that I think this is a play that you don't necessarily have to know Canadian history uh, to go into it, and understand what's happening. Um, it's really just like it's a family drama. If you think of it like sort of like just like universally the difficulty between a parent, an adult child, and a parent, and but in order to, I think, to understand the play fully, um, having a context for uh, Canadian history, and the occupation of Blackfoot territory, and the removal of children and rounding up of everything that took place, you know um, I think is something that needs to be discussed, and it would be great, I think, to have those discussions. Um, um, but how that happens, I'm totally open to
I
it.
will keep that in mind until the next time I run into you in the hallway and we can chat.
All right.
We got till April. I got ideas.
All right.
Yeah, and you can also contact me, Stacy, so
Oh,
we can take it
thank
off
you.
of Sable's plate at
Yes.
Arts, right? And we can, there's some organizing starting already, but I love if you're into helping out. I think these things that we've been having called conversation clusters and
Perfect.
who's afraid of gender is this great idea. Not your responsibility at all, Sable, but we will run everything through you, but you don't have to do it. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in helping out in Mohkinstsis, and that's great, Stacy. I'll find you out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
And I see Patty Pond's hand up.
Thanks, JD. It's Patty here. This is for November 20th when you were talking about there really aren't, to the best of my knowledge, many activities acknowledging Transgender Day of Rights from an Indigenous lens, and maybe like a short reading from Awawaki, with a Q&A in a space like, oh, I don't know, maybe the Erratics Indie Theater space, like, for example, maybe, where folks could gather and start to build some momentum about ways in which conversation can happen, right?
Mhm.
And so I just offer that up as a thought, and to build momentum for the show in May. Final thought.
Thank you, Patty. That's great. That's very concrete and very doable. And we can talk to Sable about that, and our good friend Cole. I'm sure we can make something like that happen. And it'd be very wonderful if we could do that and also combine it with some kind of ritual, Sable, that I'm really hearing that resonance of honoring that we don't know. We don't know who was lost and how. We do know the how. Okay, thank you. I saw Dorian hands was up. Not
Yes.
Dorian.
Hello.
I saw
Um,
East Elizabeth Sweeney.
Hi. Very nice to hear from you, Sable. And I'm actually from Santa Fe and would be happy to do any activation locally there. But I currently reside in Edmonton, where you said that this was kind of ideated or began writing it. So I'm also happy to do any activation there. And I'm just also very curious how place plays into the narrative, given that it is in Blackfoot territory, but does it draw from any other of the places of indigeneity that you've experienced?
Yeah, at one point I was thinking about when I was in Santa Fe, when I was at the school, and at in America, Americans just think about America. So my American friends um, and my fellow students were like, is this set in Denver? Is this set in like, and I was like, and some of them had suggested to me that, you should probably set it in somewhere like Denver or somewhere, in America because nobody knows where Calgary is. Um, and so I was thinking about it, but Denver's not Blackfoot territory. To me, it's really important to set it, um, in at least this initial, like this part of it here. Um, I guess at one point I thought when I was down south, that, because I have a number of friends and relatives who do live in the United States, and they had to go that far. They left the reserve and they moved far, far away to get away, and ended up in Vancouver, Seattle, Los Angeles, Denver, in order to have a life. And so in the story, um, Chrissy and Tony left the reserve, and they only went as far as Calgary. They came to the city here, but I guess could have easily have gone even farther away. There's people that have there's certain places that we know of that I guess are more friendly, where we have this perception that it's more livable for um for LGBTQ people. And I thought about that. I thought about that possibility, but I think, just I really wanted it to be here. I really wanted it to be in southern Alberta in Blackfoot territory, because that was my experience of growing up in Calgary. And um, I would like people to think, like young people to think, that you don't have to leave. You don't have to leave. You don't like, um, um, or to be chased away or anything like that, that we can build a community here and that we have a community here. That this is your place too.
Thank you, Sable. And thanks, Dorian. Nice to see you here. I see E. Sweeney's hand up.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Sable, I'm just wondering about the development of this work. Sorry, I came in a bit late, so if you've already talked about this, I'm sorry, but I'm curious if when you were creating this piece, if you like sought out or wanted the support of the people that you wanted support from, the folks who would be able to read your work and give you feedback on it, or could like help you, not that you needed help, but I'm just curious if you had the people you needed in the development of this work.
I did, and I think, what going back to like talking about Santa Fe, going to a place like Santa Fe, the Institute of American Indian Arts, they had just set, when I started going to school there, they had just set up a master's program in Indigenous writing and in creative writing. And so the people, that I went to school with, I also studied creative writing in Calgary at the U of C. I did my bachelor's there, and there's a really big difference between workshopping a story at the U of C English department and the Santa Fe, in at the Institute. Um, I felt like in Calgary, I was always trying to explain the context of everything in my writing before I could actually get to the story itself. Whereas when I was in Santa Fe, I didn't have to explain any of that. I could get right to the heart of the story, and there was no need to be explaining, you know, The professors at the U of C were always kind of pushing me to add more context to, and whereas in Santa Fe, it was like, I don't need to do that. We kind of, the thing about, I guess the thing about the colonization experience that happened across North America is it kind of gives us all this sort of this level of understanding, and we don't really need to talk about like residential schools and the history about them. We already know. And so when we're talking about a parent who is a residential school survivor, that's all we need to say. Like, we don't need to start adding any more context to it. We kind of know, like what may be involved in that relationship. Um, yeah, it's even I would say even working with Ed Roy, like Ed did his research. He did a lot of research on himself, but even just like his involvement with um, LGBTQ theater and the experience of being a gay man himself, and we had these discussions, and I don't know why, we just understood, we don't come from the same background or anything, but we just understood, the difficulties of growing up in the 80s and the 90s, um, in Canada, and the limited spaces and that we had, and trying to navigate through society at that time. Um, we so I feel like everybody came into this process just at the right time, and everything happened as it was supposed to happen. Like someone said, like JD had mentioned, it was like, oh, 12 years ago. But I guess in the way that I think about it is like it's happened as it's supposed to happen. It was 12 years ago. It would have been great if it had just been like a year after, like 2013 was the production, but actually I feel like the story really resonates right now. So it was meant to be.
As a follow-up, that's a really good reminder, just what you were talking about in terms of Santa Fe versus Calgary. And it made me think about the space and time that some stories, like some artists have to take out of their own practice to do this educating, or this like, just being like, okay, now I have to explain this context to you, and now I have to explain this history to you. And we already get, few opportunities for our work as it is. And then it's also taken up by having to do this like educational piece, or this like context piece, or this like, and that's a good reminder also. I'm just like thinking about what you just said, and the freedom that allows you when you went to Santa Fe to kind of not have to do that anymore. And then that gives also more space for the creation process. So anyway, thank you for that. It was really helpful.
Yeah, and I think too, like stories are there's a part of stories that are just universal. Like when I first saw Fiddler on the Roof, I absolutely loved it. I had no context for, like, as a kid, I had no context for what the story was like in terms of, like, the Jewish experience, and even like what being Jewish was. But somehow I understood it. I understood the family dynamics. I understood, there's so much about it that I understood. And then getting old, as I got older, understanding it even more and even more. And I think that's kind of like one of the beautiful things about stories, and art, is that you can go back to it. And as you grow, you can kind of grow with it, and sort of see it more and more, get something out of it.
Thank you, Sable. Yeah, it was one of the reasons I'm not even going to call it grassroots yet. I'm going to call it dirt, but it was one of the reasons we put together art rights, because taking this burden of the education off, of the artist, because it's very true that we want that energy of imagination to lift up alternative views on things, especially in the world that we're in right now. We don't want the energy going towards, there's academia already, and that's fantastic, and lectures and facts, but the power of the imagination is where we want that energy to go. Are there any other questions for Sable at this point in time? I will say that I've benefited greatly. Of course, 12 years for Sable seems like nothing. Sable is a very patient woman, and I try to learn from her, but, you know, because she's patient with how I pronunciate Blackfoot, for one thing. But also, you know, sometimes Sable will, one book that you recommended for me to read, Sable, was, that's little, was the 21 Things You Should Know About the Indian Act. And even though it's dated now, I still highly recommend it as a read, because just to come into that concept of what is the Indian Act and how that affected people, it's just a really good read. If there aren't any more questions, I'll go to the final slides. Is that okay with you, Sable? Is that okay with everybody? We might end a bit early, but we're a smaller little group. Okay, let's see if I can figure this out again. Okay. It's not the prettiest view, but there it is. Just wanted to thank Sable Sweetgrass for being an artist, which requires a lot of deep thinking, a lot of spending time in traumatic spaces in order to extract an imaginative work that we're all going to get to enjoy. I know it's not easy, my friend, and I'm just so delighted that we're going to get to see a full production in Calgary, Mohkinstsis, on your land, our land, the land. And then just a final reminder about arts rights. If we do run some conversation clusters, and we're going to be organizing around Sable's play. And if you're interested in getting involved with that or any of these things we do, Lovely Liquid Language, which is Speaking Gender Tongues 101 by Hooker Book. It's just a book club. These are small intimate groups, no more than 6 people. And in particular, organizing around this idea that surfaced today about the National Day of Trans Remembrance, and reading, and we're going to get on that. But if you're interested in helping out, artrights@gmail.com, ARTRIGHTS@gmail.com, which is the little grassroots, or I would say dirt. Maybe we're going to get all the potato initiative after of Sable and I. And to not forget about, of course, about, can you say it for me again, Sable? You're muted.
Awawaki.
Awawaki by Sable Sweetgrass, which is April 26th to May 11th, and the 5 Double Dog Dare to bring 5 people. If you're a cis person not actively working to dismantle transphobia, you are perpetuating it. So yeah, I hope you contact us and we can do some organizing around the Transgender Day of Remembrance that will tie into Sable's play, that will tie into things we can do in the spring. Thank you again, Sable, for your time and your talent. Thank you again, Kada, for hosting these town halls. And remember that the presentation is recorded. So if you know of anyone who might like to give it a lesson, it'll be up on Kada's website in about a week or 2. And I think that's all I have. Do you have any final words, Sable?
Yeah, I know we didn't really get into it, to the like the comedy of the play. I mean, like it's kind of hard to describe like the comedic aspect of it, but or else the music of it. It's really centered, the music itself is centered around Lady Gaga's earlier work, and the Tony is a drag queen who is does an impersonation of Lady Gaga called Lady Naha. And in Blackfoot, when we hear somebody say something that's kind of dirty or raunchy or something, we'll say, yeah, Naha. Like that's kind of like how we did. So Lady Naha is her drag name. And so there's this really comedic part to it, because in our culture, and probably in many cultures, there's just, in these really dark times that we've gone through, humor is one of the things that helps us get through it. And so there is that dark humor, and so Tony is really kind of that person in the play that has that. So I'm really excited. That's what I'm excited for. I don't know. I'm excited for people to see Tony, and but all the characters. But yeah, I'm looking forward to people seeing the play. It's been a long time in the making, and yeah, I'm so grateful to Theatre Calgary, to Stafford and Anna, and just everybody that is there. They've just been so great to work with, and yeah, I can't say enough about how amazing it's been.
Thank you, Sable. Thanks, everyone. Our next town hall is, if you can see the fabulous Toyin, we're actually, I think we called it Imagining the Unimaginable, something, is that correct? And I'm going to be talking to Toyin and her organizing around elevating new immigrants and art, and how that ties into her own personal story, which is really fascinating. And I hope you can join us for that. And I forget the date already, but it's soon. It's October. Anybody got it in front of them? October. Well, all time is, 12 years, 1 week, whatever. It's on the CADA website.
28.
Oh, October 28th, of course.
And the link is in the chat as well.
Oh, magic. Tech magic.
And,
Thank you.
and Toyin is here if she I don't know if she wanted to say anything.
Yes, I did point out the lovely Toyin, but thanks for that, Helen. Toyin, did you want to add to that?
No, you said it well. We're just looking forward. We had a wonderful, wonderful chat about it, and I can just wait to share with the world. Today was really great. Thanks, Sable. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Toyin, for the co-organizing of these events, all the unseen labor to hosting even a technical event, deeply appreciated. Angèle, Romper Room sees you, I see you. Thanks everybody for coming, and all the best. Take care of yourselves. Bye.